One of the most common questions that I get here on the channel is, what synthesizer should I buy as a beginner, as somebody starting out getting into synthesizers? And my answer is never the Minilogue XD, because I always try and investigate, what are you looking for? What kind of music are you making? What's your budget? But many times where we eventually end up is me recommending the Minilogue XD. And since Korg just released their Minilogue XD with the inverted color scheme, I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about 3 reasons why the Minilogue XD is such a great beginner synth. And a big thank you to Korg who sent over the inverted Minilogue XD. The XD has been one of my most used synths for many, many years now. So reason number 1 that the Minilogue XD is a great beginner synth is of course the I'm gonna talk about the workflow. Because regardless what people say on online synth forums, sound is only part of the equation. What I've found is, if the sound is good but the workflow isn't, or it's a too complicated synth, especially for your skill level, people tend to get rid of it after a while. You have an initialized sound and everything is at your fingertips. So let's start here over at the VCOs. So VCOs are the things that makes the sound. It's the oscillators. These are analog. So we have waveforms from saw, triangle to square, but we also have wave shape. And if we check the little oscilloscope over here, you can actually see how the wave is changing when I'm turning the wave shape knob. And the oscilloscope is actually a useful learning tool to see what's going on with the waveform as you are changing it. We also have octave control. And here's the thing, if a hardware synth is going to compete with all of those tasty virtual instruments that you can just fire up really quickly, there's a ton of presets, I think that it has to have a very quick workflow. So we can turn up VCO number 1, add in VCO 2. We can change the pitch ever so slightly on each of them. Turn on the reverb, make sure it's set to rev, and then we turn up the time a bit of depth, the first oscillator up 1 octave. So we're already off to a good start. Now we're gonna introduce the filter. We're cutting some of the higher frequencies. And we're adding in some drive, and we're adding in some resonance. But we're not done yet. Let's add in the amp EG. This shapes the curve of the sound over time, so the amplitude over time. We put a bit of attack, full decay, a bit of sustain, a bit of release. And we're going to use the second EG here. It only has attack and decay. That's a limitation. The OG Minilogue actually has 2 full envelopes that you can use with attack, decay, sustain, release. This one only has attack and decay, but we can live with that. So you set the target here. It's either cutoff, the filter, or it's the pitch of the oscillators. So you're going to set it to the cutoff. So by setting the cutoff pretty far down, so basically the higher frequencies are being filtered out and a bit of resonance here. And then we have a long attack and a pretty long decay here on this EG, and we turn the intensity positively. It will create a nice filter sweep. Then we come to the LFO here, and again we have targets, so we can put it to pitch, shape, or cutoff. Now if we put it to cutoff, we'll have two things interacting with the filter, and that can always be fun. And here we select the waveform, basically the way in which the LFO moves a knob. So if it's, for example, set to a triangle, it will move the knob upwards and then downwards in a very even fashion. But if it's instead set to a square, it will be a more on or off sort of motion. So let's do triangle. Rate sets the speed at which it moves a knob, so we can go really fast and affect the cutoff a ton. But for a pad type sound, we don't want that crazy intensity, we don't want that crazy high rate. But we could also set it to shape. This will change the waveform of the sound. So if we look at the oscilloscope here, we see the waveform. If I turn this up, you can see how it starts moving. That's because we're modulating the wave shape. And now we can add in a mod effect, so a chorus and a delay. And it's that simple to create a sound quickly on the Minilogue XD. It's very hands-on. If I want to make changes, the knobs are right there. There's not a lot to think about. And we haven't even added in the digital oscillator, so just turn up this knob here. There are also different modes, so poly, you can do a big unison sound if you want to. Turn down sustain, we turn down release, and suddenly we have a totally different sound. You also have a chord mode, and you also have an arpeggiator. And here we're using a high-pass delay with a really short time to create this sort of effect. And also sync the pitch of the two oscillators, and we can also turn on ring mod. And now we're setting this EG here to pitch and get some cool results. Now let's talk about the second reason why the Minilogue XD is a great beginner synth and also a synth that you can grow with, and that is expandability. The Minilogue XD has a librarian software, so here I have a new plugin from LoopUp that I'm gonna test. As you can see here, from just Sine Vibes, there's a ton of extra effects and oscillators, and there's plenty of other people making these plugins as well. You can load not just custom oscillators, you can also load custom effects. For example, here's an oscillator from Sine Vibes called Groove. It basically is a drum kit as an oscillator. So with that oscillator and the sequencer, we can program a drum beat. Do note that you can't use the other oscillators now to play along to that drum beat, because this is not a multi-timbral synthesizer. Multi-timbral means that the synth can play more than one sound at a time. So for example, splitting a keyboard, playing two different sounds on the keyboard. This is something you can't do on the Minilogue XD, for example. And here's a brand new oscillator from Sine Vibes called Flare. It's an additive synthesis oscillator. That's way too complicated for me to explain in this video. You can also load custom effects. So here is, for example, LoopUp's new effect that I think just came out. So it basically samples incoming audio and then shifts it a bit in time in stereo so you can play along with it. And that just creates ever evolving sounds and textures. And it's just one example of how you can expand the Minilogue XD using user oscillators and user effects, which I think is big, and we don't see this on many other synths. I actually can't think of any synth that can do something like this, but I'm sure there is one. Now, the third reason why this is a good beginner synth is, of course, the sound. No, we're not specifically going to talk about the sound. I've played you demos. If you like the sound, you should know by now the sound is good. The sound is comparable to what's out there around this price. And it's the price I want to talk about. Because with the times that we live in, with the inflation that's going on, synth prices are rising, but the Minilogue XD is still a very affordable synthesizer at around $600 depending on where you live. Now, the price might be different when you are watching this, so go and check it out. I've linked a few stores in the description. If you use those links, I get a little percent kickback regardless of what you buy. So if you just buy a cable, you're supporting the channel. You don't have to buy a Minilogue. You can buy whatever you want. But as of making this video here, the Minilogue XD has held its price surprisingly well over time, which is also surprising given that Korg is one of the companies that have put a higher price tag on many of their new synths. But the Minilogue XD stays in a reasonably affordable range. Now, there are two things that you should think about before buying a Minilogue XD. The first one is that it only has 4 voices, meaning that you can only do 4-note chords with it. And that can definitely be a limiting factor. I often find myself wanting to do bigger chords. And if you want to, and if you want an analog synth, you'll be paying more money, definitely. Secondly, this synth does not have a mod matrix. If you don't know what that is, it's simply a way to select a source and a destination. So for example, an LFO affecting the cutoff as we've seen before. But this routing here, you set it here, it's predetermined. If you have a mod matrix, you can decide the routings yourself. And for that, you need a more advanced synth like, for example, the Novation Peak that has an extensive mod matrix that lets you set up routings yourself. It basically means that you can do a ton more with what's there. On the Minilogue XD and also the OG Minilogue, you have to be okay with the routings that Korg have decided. So it's a strength in terms of being beginner friendly, but it's a weakness in terms of doing more advanced sound design. So keep that in mind if that's something you might want to do. So that was 3 reasons why the Minilogue XD is still a great beginner synth. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments as always, and have a great day, and talk to you all later.